So this is Tools for Brisk, and we're trying to find methodological constructs that will help us understand Shas, understand the halacha. And the one that we're studying now, which we started last week, and I want to just review the basics of what we covered, is called Din Klali Din Misuyam, which means that you may have a universal principle, a mitzvah or an isur, and what you have to determine, is it klali, is it general, meaning it doesn't take on a particular identity, it just remains that in that general concept, or is it a din misuyam, which means it's very, very specific and it takes on the identity of that particular, it's like a chameleon, wherever it is, that's where it takes on the form and the definition of that particular isur or that particular chiyuv. So to demonstrate this last time, we spoke at great length about hidur mitzvah, which is derived from zekeli v'amveu. And we asked the following question: is hidur mitzvah a din klali? Is it a general mitzvah? And when I buy a beautiful esrog, that I fulfill zekeli v'amveu. If I buy a beautiful talus, I beautify my talus. Zekeli v'amveu.
Zekeli v'amveu
means to beautify God's mitzvahs. So that's called a din klali, meaning wherever I can plug it in to any mitzvah, any opportunity, I'm going to beautify it and therefore fulfill hidur mitzvah. So we'll have hidur mitzvah in Chanukah, we'll have hidur mitzvah in how I beautify my Suda Shav. Everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, we'll try to beautify. That's called din klali. There's another way of defining hidur mitzvah, and that was more exciting. That was a chidush. That was something new. That was an insight. And that is to take a particular mitzvah and show how inherent in that mitzvah itself there's a dimension of hidur mitzvah. So that from that perspective, let's say in Chanukah, there are specific unique dinim, laws that govern the Ner Chanukah, the light of Chanukah, because of hidur mitzvah. And in Esrog, there are unique laws that are generated by the mitzvah of Esrog to beautify the Esrog. So it's not just that I'm fulfilling this general, shall we say, universal mitzvah of hidur, of beautifying, but rather the mitzvah changes its identity and takes on a new status as a result of hidur mitzvah. And we demonstrated this with the example of milah on Shabbos. If you circumcise a child on Shabbos, because that's the 8th day and it overrides the Shabbos, could you go so far as to override the Shabbos just for hidur mitzvah of milah? So, for example, the case in the Gemara is that you did the basic milah, but there's something called tzitzin she'eno ma'akvin. You can do a little bit more of the milah and in so fulfill hidur mitzvah. Now, if hidur mitzvah is a din klali, then it's a mitzvah of zekeli v'amveu. That doesn't have the power to override the Shabbos. But if on the other hand it takes on the complexion of milah, so the mitzvah of milah changes. So by cutting these extra tzitzin, I enhance my mitzvah of milah. Then the mitzvah of milah is docha Shabbos. So you see the difference between a din klali and a din misuyam. And so we say also that maybe if you have an esrog that doesn't lend itself at all to hidur mitzvah, then it might be possible. I mean, built into the mitzvah of esrog is the requirement of hidur mitzvah, of beautifying the mitzvah. So this concept of din klali, din misuyam becomes more meaningful as we proceed. The last thing we discussed, but it was just an introduction, and that's what I want to spend some time on now, is the avera, the prohibition of lifnei iver lo sitein michshal, which although literally means you can't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, that's based on Torah B'chsav. But in Torah Sheba'al Peh, the way that Chazal interpret it is that you can't help someone or facilitate someone's violation of an avera. Meaning, if I know that you're about to commit a crime and I give you the wherewithal to do so, let's say here's a gun and I would give you the gun to murder someone, then I would violate this prohibition called lifnei iver lo sitein michshal. Now, lifnei iver lo sitein michshal, if it means abetting in a crime, takes on the complexion of a din klali. You already see it's a universal principle that applies to every single avera in the Torah. It doesn't matter what the avera is. If you're about to eat nevela and I sell you the nevela, or I hand you the nevela over, if you're a nazir and you're enjoined from wine and I give you a cup of wine that you couldn't get, again we'll get into that later, then I violate the prohibition of lifnei iver lo sitein michshal. If, for example, you're a Kohen and you're not allowed to marry a divorcee, a grusha, and you ask me to be your shliach, your agent, to marry this woman off for you on your behalf, then what I'm doing, if I agree, if I play that role as a shliach, and I comply with your wishes, is I violate lifnei iver. So again, you name the avera, whatever avera you want, and there'll always be lifnei iver if somebody would help that person fulfill his intention of violating that crime.
Person has to be active in helping him. Can't be passive.
I don't know what you have in mind. We'll take every case as it goes. But generally speaking, I don't know, again, if you have in mind some sugya that I'm not familiar with.
No, if you're aware of... The idea of a stumbling block, right, is not that if one sees a stumbling block and a blind person is walking to it, it strikes me that you should do something about it.
Oh, that's a different mitzvah. That's arvus. That means separating, to be mafresh someone from Easter, to try to separate him. That's not what we're talking about. Okay. We're talking about an active case,
right,
where you actually extend to someone the object with which he will employ and implement the crime because you helped him to do it. That's called lifnei iver. Now, again, intuitively, we sense a din klali, lifnei iver. So, if, for example, I know that this non-Jew is about to violate avodah zarah, and I sell him an idol, or I bring him an idol to worship, so I violate lifnei iver. Or no? Is it a din misuyam? Could it be that lifnei iver takes on the shape and the identity of that particular avera, so that lifnei iver for avodah zarah, for idol worship, becomes a subcategory of avodah zarah, as if I had violated avodah zarah, and lifnei iver for tzicha becomes ritzicha, and lifnei iver for nevela becomes nevela, and lifnei iver for whatever the avera is takes on the complexion of that avera. And what leads me to that conclusion is a Gemara in Beit Midrash Daf Yud Amud Beis that we began with last time, and you'll see this on page Chav Gimel for those who have the pages. And again, I apologize, I wasn't able to get to a photocopy machine to make more copies. The Gemara has a principle called Ein Shliach Lidvar Avera. And within the context of Ein Shliach L'Dvar Avera, which means that you cannot send an agent to perform an Avera for you, the Gemara has an exception to the rule. And that exception to the rule is if the Shliach himself is a Lav Bar Chiyuva, meaning that Avera for which you're sending him is irrelevant to him. He has no connection to that Avera. So, for example, if a Kohen would appoint a Yisrael as a shliach to marry a grusha off on his behalf, the Yisrael, as far as this Isur, as this prohibition of kahuna, is totally out of the picture. He doesn't have the aver of kahuna because he's not a Kohen. His father wasn't a Kohen and his grandfather wasn't a Kohen. So he doesn't have the aver of marrying a grusha. So Tosfos, on the surface of it, says, wait a minute, what's going on here? The Gemara's postulate is that in this case, where the shliach is totally out of the radar screen, out of the purview of this avera, then yesh shliach lidvar avera, that's called again lav bar chiyuva. maybe you're right. He doesn't have the avera of marrying a grusha because he's not a Kohen. But what about another avera that he has? Namely, lifnei iver. He's violating the avera of lifnei iver by implementing the shlichus and marrying this woman, this grusha, off to the Kohen. He has thereby violated lifnei iver. So how could you even imagine a lav bar chiyuva once there's lifnei iver? So Tosfos makes the following distinction. He says there are two categories of lifnei iver. There's lifnei iver in the case of a Yisrael who marries off this grusha to the Kohen. The Yisrael is the shliach. And then there's another case where a Kohen serves as a shliach to marry off this woman to another Kohen. Says Tosfos, in the case of a Kohen being a shliach for another Kohen, you've got a lifnei iver which makes the shliach into a bar chiyuva. But in the case of a Yisrael, even though I grant you he does violate the Issa, the prohibition of lifnei iver, nevertheless he's considered a lav bar chiyuva, and therefore yesh shliach l'dvar. And the question here is, what's the difference? In both cases, when the shliach is a Kohen, or a Yisrael, there's a violation of lifnei iver, and Tosfos doesn't deny it. So Tosfos' language is the Kohen mikri bar chiyuva. Hoil, since in makad liatzmo, had he married off this woman to himself, chayav. Aval Yisrael, and listen carefully, it's on the bottom of the right column. Afal pidi over mishum lifnei iver lo sitei mikshal k'shmakad lekohen. Kevan de imakad liatzmo lo mechayev lo mikri bar chiyuva. Again, if Tosfos would have denied lifnei iver and he would have said, well, the Yisrael doesn't have lifnei iver, then I would understand Tosfos. But Tosfos is very clear, he's outspoken that there is a violation of lifnei iver. And nevertheless, he's a lav bar chiyuva, and yesh shliach l'dvar vera. But if he were a Kohen, and therefore he's not allowed to marry her off to himself, therefore, it's a different lifnei iver. He's a bar chiyuva. Well, what difference does it make? In all cases, he's not allowed to play the role of a shliach to get involved in this criminal relationship of a marriage between a Kohen and a grusha, a divorcee. So if in both cases there's a lifnei iver, why do you lift the principle of bar chiyuv in the case of the Yisrael, despite the lifnei iver, but in the case of the Kohen you insist that he's a bar chiyuv, therefore ain't shliach l'dvar vera.
Bar chiyuva?
Bar chiyuva means that he's in violation of the Isur. Okay? As opposed to, let's say, if you would have sent, a non-Jew to be a shliach, if a non-Jew could be a shliach, or a katan, or different cases like that.
So he could do it for Kohen, the Yisrael. He could engage a woman.
Yeah. Well, again, if he asked us would he be allowed to do so, we would definitely tell him he's not, because he violates lifnei iver. But if he went ahead and he did it, the shlichus is valid. Yesh shliach l'dvar vera. By the way, yesh shliach l'dvar vera does not mean that we encourage him to become a shliach. For sure not. He's going to violate a lav of lifnei iver. But what we mean to say is the shlichus is valid. And we're going to suspend the normal operation of ein shliach l'dvar vera, and we're going to verify and certify the shlichus is valid. So we see from this that Tosfos has the possibility of lifnei iver as a din mesuyam. In other words, according to Tosfos, bar chiyuva means that you share in the violation of this particular isur. Says Tosfos that if the shliach is a Kohen marrying off a grusha on behalf of another Kohen, he is a bar chiyuva. Why? Because through lifnei iver, even though again he's not marrying her off to himself, he's certainly not in violation of the Isur of Grusha LeKohen, right? He's only marrying her off to a different Kohen. So why can't he raise his hands and say, oh, I'm clean, my record is clean, I'm not in violation of this Avera, I'm a lav bar chiyuva. No, you are a bar chiyuva. Because your Avera, had you married her off to yourself, schleps you in, it sucks you into this Avera of Grusha LeKohen. Even though you're not marrying her off to yourself, but now your lifnei iver is specific to this avera. You now take on, through this lifnei iver, the complexion of a violation of this particular avera. Mashen came in the case of Yisrael. Their lifnei iver remains a din klalit, because the Yisrael is completely excluded from Yisurei Kahuna. He doesn't know what it's all about. And therefore his lifnei iver is a general lifnei iver, but he still remains, as far as Isur Kahuna, a lav bar chiyuv. Now, the Ritva in Bava Metzia is quoted in the Shita Mekubetz with a different teretz. He says that lifnei iver, even for the Yisrael, would be a problem, and we would apply ein shliach l'dvar vera. But we only apply lifnei iver, says the Ritva, in a case what's called trei ibri denari, which literally means two sides of a river. So it means if you don't have access, let's say you're a Nazir and you don't have access to take a ship, a boat across the river and get the wine. So if I make that wine accessible to you and you wouldn't have had it otherwise, then and only then do I violate lifnei iver. But if it's chad ibri denari, we're both standing within the same proximity and I just give it to you, but you would have taken it yourself anyway if I wasn't there, then you don't violate lifnei iver. So the Ritva claims that this sugi in Bava Metzia on Daf Yud Amud Beis is talking about a case where the Mishalech, meaning the Kohen that's marrying this Grusha, is not out there in the boondocks. You know, he's not up on the Antarctic. He could have married her himself. And therefore there's no lifnei iver. You see that the Ritva is so bothered by the Kash of Tosfos of lifnei iver that he thinks in general there should be a bar chiyuva definition. It means that the Ritva is assuming that always lifnei iver is a din misuyam and gives me a violation, produces a violation of that particular Isur. When I cause you to violate the Isur, again, it's got to be trei ibri denari, you couldn't have done it without me. But if I facilitate your ability to violate the Avera, I participate in that Avera. And therefore all the dinim of that Avera apply. If this be the case, my friends, then let's go back to the paradigm that I gave you before of an idol worshiper. If you facilitate, if you sell an idol, again, you come up with different cases, but let's say you sell an idol to an idolater, and now he violates Avodah Zarah because you gave him the idol. In such a case, there's a violation of lifnei iver. Well, what is it? Is it a din klali, lifnei iver, and that's where it ends? Or is it a din mesuyam? And by facilitating his avodah zarah, you now have an avera, not just lifnei iver, but lifnei iver produces the avera of avodah zarah. And what would be the difference?
Punishment.
The punishment. Okay, that I'm not sure how far we're going to go with the punishment. Exactly, Mesiras Nefesh. Because what's unique about avodah zarah in the constellation of Averis? What group does it belong to? What high-powered group?
Big three.
The big three. So since it belongs to the big three, it means Yeharg Val Yavar, you can't violate this even to save your life. The whole principle of V'chai Bahem, that you live by the precepts of the Torah, don't die by them, is completely null and void, suspended in the case of Avodah Zarah. So what happens if somebody puts a gun to my head and he says to me, you sell me that idol, or give me that idol, or I'll blow you up to smithereens? Then would I have to give up my life rather? He's not asking me to violate Avodah Zarah. He's asking me to abet in the crime, to make it accessible to him to violate Avodah Zarah. Would I have to give my life for that? So again, if you have these pages, there's a Balamar, which is really way out. And this is on the left side of page Chaf Daled. Lefi shitas Balamar yesh chiyuv yehareg val yavar afilu al lifnei iver de isra Avodah Zarah. The Balamar holds that I have to give up my life rather than violate lifnei iver of Avodah Zarah. What's he working with? A din klali or a din mesuyam? Oh, a din mesuyam. See, if not for this brisker chakira of din kloli, din mesuyim, I think we'd have a lot of trouble understanding what this Balamor is about. Because the ruling of the Balamor makes your hair stand on end. That a person would have to give up his life rather than violate lifnei iver when he himself is not worshiping the idol. But the answer is that the lifnei iver takes on the complexion, the identity of that particular avera.
Is he selling it to a non-Jew or a Jew?
It matters not. I don't think it makes one bit of a difference. Okay, the Ramban seems to disagree with the Balamor, and it's all in the Milchamis and in Masechta Sanhedrin, and it's worth researching it further. So again, I think Lifnei Iver is a classical case that fits into this bifurcation, this dualism of din klali, or let's call it iser klali, or iser mesuyam. Does it take on the complexion of that particular avera? And now, I would like to talk to you about the iser chatzi shir. We know that in what's called machalos asuros, forbidden eating, forbidding foods, you have to be very careful and not eat what's called a kizayis. Correct? A kizayis is the barest minimum, what we call the shir, of a violation of machalos asuros. So if you eat a kizayis nevela, you violate the Isur nevela. If you eat a kizayis chelev, you violate the Isur chelev. And so forth and so on. Even in Shvuah Nedarim, the shir is nevela. Ein achila pachos mi kizayis. But there's a sugya in the last parak of Yuma, parak Yom Kippurim, a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Chatzi shir asur min haTorah. What's the difference between a full shir of a kazayis and half a zayis? And again, half doesn't necessarily mean half or part of a zayis. Says Rabbi Yochanan, there's only a difference as far as the punishment is concerned. But as far as the prohibition is concerned, to the same extent we're enjoined from eating a kazayis of nevela, we can't eat a half a kazayis of nevela. And if on Yom Kippur you're not allowed to eat a koseves hagasa, a certain shear, then you can't eat half a kazayis of a koseves hagasa on Yom Kippur. Reish Lakish disagrees. Reish Lakish holds that chatzi shear is not an Isur Torah, it's only an Isur Derabbanan. And there'd be a tremendous nafkamina between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, besides the obvious one about whether or not the Torah prohibited a chatzi shear. In the case of a person who takes a shvuah, he takes an oath upon himself that he won't eat any amount of nevela. So we normally have a principle, ein shvuah chal shvuah, you can't take one shvuah on top of another shvuah. And with regard to nevela, mushba v'yomei me'ar Sinai, we all took the shvuah, the oath. Atem nisavim kulchem, every one of our souls was there to take the shvuah, take the oath of enjoining us from eating nevela. And now he takes a shvuah, he says, I swear I won't eat nevela. What does he gain by that? So the second shvuah, meaning the first shvuah was the shvuah he took in Har Sinai. The second shvuah he's taking now is ein shvuah chalisa. The second shvuah is meaningless. It doesn't cut the ice. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan. He says, wait a minute. Mushba v'yomei bar Sinai. Let's see. Does it include chatzi shir? If a person takes a shvuah that he won't eat any amount of nevela, maybe he's adding something to the original shvuah of Har Sinai. And that's exactly what Reish Lakish says. Reish Lakish says the Torah didn't prohibit him to eat half a shir of half a zayis of nevela. Now he's taking a shvuah to enjoin himself from eating even half a zayis of nevela. Then there's no problem with shvuah chal shvuah. Now his shvuah is valid. Says Rabbi Yochanan, what do you mean? He's mushba v'yomei mar Sinai because of chatzi shir asur min haTorah. The Gemara vacillates back and forth on this point. So now, the question is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, where does this come from? We know that the Torah says achila equals kizayis. Where's this business of chatzi shir? And the Gemara offers two answers. One answer is kol chelev. In the parish of chelev, when the Torah prohibits chelev, it says kol chelev lo so chelev. What's the extra word kol? Any chelev? So Rabbi Yochanan says, mikan chatzi shir osam in Torah. Now keep in mind, Rabbi Yochanan's principle applies to every single iser machal sasus in the Torah. It's not limited to chelev. Chelev is just my paradigm case from which I derive the conclusion of chatzi shir osam in Torah. And then the Gemara offers a different answer for Rabbi Yochanan. Namely, chazi litztarufe. Rabbi Yochanan is not based on a pasuk, on a verse in the Torah that says kol chelev. Forget about the alfusa. Drop the pasuk. You don't need this limit. But rather, chazi litztarufe. If you have a half a zayis, you can add another half a zayis. Therefore, the Torah doesn't want you to eat half a zayis. Because once you start eating half a zayis, who knows where that's going to lead you? You might end up bleeding. You know these people who say, oh, I'll only eat so much. Yeah, but then what happens at the end? So that's called chazi litztarufe. Now I think, l'fi ani izdaiti, and that I don't know if you'll find here in these pages, there is a fundamental machlokus here in terms of how to understand chatzi shir, osam and Torah Rabbi Yochanan, between kol chelev and chazi litztarufe. And I'll tell you what I think it means. Chazi litztarufe, if you accept that svara, is basically saying that you can take any object. Let's say we had a zayis of nevela here. Well, you remember Zeno's paradox. I mean, you can constantly cut it down into small divisions. Every single division, every atom, every molecule is nevela. Otherwise, how do you ever get a kizayis? I start eating, so I ate part of a kizayis. Now I eat another. But every achila was the answer is that we have to arrive at what we call a chefza d'isura, meaning the nevela and every part thereof has to be nevela. So whenever I cut out a small piece of nevela, it remains nevela. That's called chazi l'tzarufe. Now the svar of chazi l'tzarufe is really just a gili milsa. It teaches me it reveals to me what I should have known anyway, but this is just the way of communicating it, that every part of the nevela is called nevela. The Torah says don't eat nevela. But if it's kol chelev, then this is some sort of a general rule that we have to abstain from chatzi shir. I would call it a din klal. So let's now summarize what we're saying. Yesh lachar. Let's raise the following question: what is the nature of the iser chatzi shir osam in Torah according to Rabbi Yochanan? Is it a din klali? Meaning, when I eat half a zayis of whatever I'm eating, it doesn't take on the complexion, the identity of that particular isur. It remains an isur klali. It's this anonymous, faceless isur that universally applies to every single machalas asuras that you can imagine. Chadash and dam and nevela and kelek chaya keren bas b'cham, whatever you come up with, chametz and pesach. Or no? Is chatzi shir a din or an isur mesuyam, and therefore it takes on the definition of that cheftzah d'isura. It takes on that shame isur. That's the identity that it has. And maybe that's what the Gemara is vacillating about, whether you say mushpa v'yomim Har Sinai. The Torah, we took a shvu at Har Sinai not to eat nevela. Does that include chatzi shir? Well, it depends. If chatzi shir is an isur nevela, then it's included in that shvu. But if chatzi shir is only an isur klali, then, my friends, it wasn't one of the 613. It was kol chelev, but that's meta 613. It's beyond the purview of the 613. So where do we go with this? There's something very fascinating which you'll see on page Yud Zayin. The Rambam, in the first parak of Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, has a separate yalfusa. He derives from a pasuk that you can't eat half a zayis of chametz on Pesach. Lo yeyachel. So the Kesef Mishnah gets very upset about this Rambam. What does the Rambam need a special pasuk lo yeyachel The Rambam happens to paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, Chatzi Shir Asur Min Torah. So that's a universal principle that applies to all Machalos Asuros, all Isurim. So the Rambam doesn't have to go kikuchla, through every single Isur and say, well, what's the pasuk for dam, and what's the pasuk for chelev, and how do I know that nevela is also b'chatzi shir, and how do I know that treifa is also b'chatzi shir, etc., etc. No, the Rambam doesn't have to do that. If he already has in his, how should I say, what word am I looking for? He has in his repertoire, no, arsenal. Is that the word? In his arsenal, chatzi shir, then he doesn't need a pasuk to generate the Isur, the prohibition of eating half as ice of nevela. What could be the answer? Let's think like a Brisk lambda here. In general, what is the nature of chatzi shir? It's a din kol. The Rama wants to generate, with regard to chametz, a din misuya. And for that he needs a pasuk. And then Afkamina is awesome, because now all the unique chumros, all the unique strictures and prohibitions that are very heavy in chametz, now apply to chatzi shir. For example, chametz is also b'mashu. It's the only Isur that we know of that if you throw into a mixture, a big pot, I don't care how big the pot is, a little bit of chametz, I don't care how small the chametz is, it asks the whole thing. Or, for example, if you own chametz, you violate bal yirah bal yimatzeh. That doesn't apply to any other Isur that I know of. So there are certain very strict halachas that apply to chametz as chametz. What happens in the case of chatzi shir? Am I eating chatzi shir or am I eating chametz? What violation have I, what criminal act have I violated? Is doch the Rambam needs a pasuk of lo ye'achel to include chametz in the case of chatzi shir under the category of chametz. It now takes on the unique identity of chametz, which drags with it all the chumras, all the strict laws of chametz.
What is the shear of chametz that you're permitted to eat?
I can't think of any shear, because again, we're holding like Rabbi Yochanan chatzi shir asur min Torah. But the question is, if I violate that and I eat a chatzi shir, what if I violated? Did I violate chatzi shir or did I violate chametz? Do you follow? That's the tools for brisk that I keep yelling and screaming about. If you talk about a din klali, then I violated chatzi shir. If you talk about a din mesuyim, then I violated chametz. In other words, when I point to this half a zayis of chametz, what am I looking at? Am I looking at a half a zayis of an Isur, but it has no specific name? It doesn't have an identity of its own, because there's no such thing as an Isur without a kizayis. But call it an Isur because of chatzi shir. We'll call it kol chelev. Or do I look at it and say, you know what I have in front of me? I've got chametz. And the Rambam, in order to point to this half a zayis and call it chametz, needs the pasuk lo ye'achel. In order to take it from the status of a din klali and put it into the very special category of din mesuyam, the Rambam needs a limud for that. And that's what he derives. Further, if you take a look over here on page Yud Zayin, there's a fascinating, on page Yud Zayin on the left side, there's a fascinating sugya in Yuma Daf Pei Gimel. What's this sugya about? It's about what's called a chole misukan, somebody who's dangerously ill. Now, if he's dangerously ill, then we apply the principle of v'chai bahem, and we could feed him, if need be, machalas asuris. You can feed him anything. However, the best thing to do is to feed him pachos mikashir. And the Ramban in Yuma Pei Gimel says the following. It's a case of a pregnant woman, and she has to eat because also bulmus. Hitiru la leubra lechol pachos mikashir mipnei asakona. So there is halacha of pachos mikashir. Because obviously, even though Chatzi Shir is awesome in a Torah, it's not the same level of Isra as a full Shir. So if you can feed her in small increments, that's the best thing to do. And now, we have the following issue. There's some other principle that we have to know, and that's called Hakal Kal Tchila. What do I mean? If, let's say, you can save someone's life, and there's no bit of a difference whether you feed them, for argument's sake, chelev or nevela, then what would you choose? Chelev is an Isur Kares. Nevela is only an Isur Lav. So relative to nevela, chelev becomes an Isur Chamur, and nevela becomes an Isur Kal. So the rule is Hakal Kal Tchila. If you can, again, if all things are equal, and you can get away with feeding the sick person, kal, something that's a lightweight Isur, then that's the way you should do it. Good? Oh. Now, with regard to kal kal tchila, would it make any difference whether you had a chatzi shir or a complete shir? You follow my question? V'nireh, the af b'chol she'osin kein kedei lahakil av mi'isur kares u'makas li'isur b'lechud, im kein lama omru machilin osa kal kal tevel u'truma, machilin osa truma, if there's a choice between tevel and truma, you give him truma. Halo b'shneim ein b'hem el isur bi'alma. He says, if you're giving them pachos mikashir, right, this he's quoting in the name of I think it's the Ramban, let me just make sure. Yeah, the Ramban. So what difference does it make whether you feed him truma, a tevel, chelev, or nevela? You're feeding him anyway chatzi shir. So according to this svara, once you're feeding him chatzi shir, the principle of kal kal tchil is completely null and void. In other words, it makes no difference whether you give him kal or you give him chamur, whether the shem isur is this shem isur or that shem isur, because at the end of the day you're giving him chatzi shir. What do you see? Excellent. It's a din klol. It means that we completely, how should I say, what word am I looking for? Vitiate the personality, the identity, the face. It's a face-lifting job, right? The Isur becomes anonymous. It doesn't matter whether you're feeding him a chatzi shir of chelev or a chatzi shir of nevela. At the end of the day, it's the same identical Isur of chatzi shir. But those who disagree and say that even in the case of pachas mikashir, we still apply the principle of kal kal tchila. You see that it takes on the individual Isur, and then chatzi shir is a din mesuya. If it's a din Messiah, then obviously I'd rather give him a chatzi shir of nevela than give him a chatzi shir of chelev, because in both cases it maintains the same Isur. So you're comparing nevela to chelev, and nevela vis-a-vis chelev is kal, and therefore give him nevela rather than give him chelev. And then there's a long discussion here about a shvua on chatzi shir of an Isur, whether you say mushpa v'yomid mar Sinai. That again depends upon whether it has the shem Isur as a din mesuyam or it has the shem kloli. Okay, I mean this goes on and on. Let's talk a little bit about another mitzvah, and that's the mitzvah of chinuch. Take a look on page Chaf Hey. A father is obligated to train his child in mitzvahs. You can't just expect a child to hit bar mitzvah and start from scratch. He hasn't been trained in mitzvahs. Now, if chinuch applies as it does to all mitzvahs, you can ask the question, is this a din or a mitzvah klalis, chinuch, or is it a din misuya, a chiyuv misuya? In other words, when the child implements his mitzvah of chinuch, what do we have on the table? Do we have a general universal mitzvah of chinuch? That's a din klali. Or do we have that particular mitzvah that he's fulfilling? So first we have to ask the question, who's obligating the mitzvah of chinuch? If it's the father who's obligating the mitzvah of chinuch, then I doubt if you can postulate a din mesuyam. You're definitely talking about a din klali. The father has, in a sense, he's the manager of his child. He has to oversee his child's mitzvahs in general. But I'm bothered because I'm going to try to prove to you that the Rambam holds that the mitzvah of chinuch is not just the father's mitzvah, but the child himself is obligated in chinuch. So does he pick up the chinuch of that particular mitzvah? Does anybody know a nafkamina? There's a very famous nafkamina here about whether the child picks up that mitzvah or not. Sphere some, you mean the famous case where he gets bar mitzvah in the middle? Let's think about that. If it's a mitzvah klal, yeah, that's not bad. I like that idea. But I'm talking about something that the Rishonim really fight it out of. There's a sugi in brachos about whether a katan could bench on behalf of a gadol. In other words, whether the halach of yatsa motzi applies in the case of a katan. Obviously, the gadol ate less than the shear of kidei svia, because otherwise the gadol is chayiv in birkas hamazon da'oraisa v'yachalta v'savata uveirachta. And therefore there's no question that a katan, even if I postulate that the chiyuv of chinuch is incumbent upon the katan, it's only a chiyuv d'Rabbanan, and someone who's obligated d'Rabbanan cannot be motzi someone who's obligated d'Oraisa. But let's assume that the gadol himself only ate less than a shear of svia. He ate a kizayis, he didn't eat a kibetza. Now what's the nature of his obligation to bench? It's only d'Rabbanan. And let's say the katan ate a full meal, kedei svia, his obligation, if we postulate the mitzvah of chinuch obligates him, is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Now we have a shivyan, we have an equality here. The katan is chayiv min Rabbanan, the gadol is chayiv min Rabbanan. Can the katan be motzi the gadol? So this is a famous machlokas. Tosfos, if you'll take a look here, holds in brachas daf chaf. Actually, the sugi is in brachas daf chaf, and Tosfos is in brachos mem ches amud aleph. This is towards the bottom of your column. He says that the katan can be motzi the gadol. Heichi osi d'Rabbanan patu d'Oraisa. And Tosfos answers, Ha d'sharu l'katan sheyachal otzi aviv b'di ochal aviv kizayis. His father only ate a kizayis di osi katan d'Rabbanan she'igil l'chinuch u'pater aviv she'enu chayv l'mirabbanan. So I derive two conclusions from this Tosfos. First conclusion is that chinuch is incumbent not just upon whom? The father, but also on the katan. Otherwise, if he's not a bar chiyuv, he can't be motzi the gadol. Conclusion number two is that if the katan becomes a bar chiyuv midrabanan, his status is identical to that of a gadol who only ate a shear kizayis. And therefore they both share the identical obligation of birkas hamazon, and the katan can be motzi the gadol. You could question either of those two postulates. You could either argue that the chiyuv of chinuch is incumbent upon the father, and therefore for sure the katan can't be motzi the gadol. Or even if I grant you that the chiyuv chinuch is incumbent upon the katan, but it's not a chiyuv mesuyam. He doesn't pick up the chiyuv of birkas hamazon per se. He has a universal general mitzvah, what I call a faceless mitzvah of chinuch. But he doesn't share the mitzvah of chinuch, the chiyuv of birkas hamazon, even on a d'Rabbanan level. The mitzvah on the katan is not birkas hamazon in this case, but rather chinuch. Clear? Oh. Let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam happens to agree with Tosfos. It happens once in a while, kind of rarely. The Rambam is in Perek Hey Milchas Brachas Halacha Tez Zayin. Ben Mevarach Li Aviv. a son can recite Birchas HaMazon on behalf of his father. By Medvar, when this is applied, Sheyotzi Dechovasim Mizvan Sha'achlu Vosavim, etc. They didn't have Kedei Svir. And therefore, the only Chayim Divrei Sofrim, Lefichach Motzir So HaKatan. So again, the Rambam is postulating two points. Number one, that the Katan is Chayiv in Chinuch. And number two, he's not just Chayiv in Chinuch, but through the vehicle of Chinuch, he becomes Chayiv in Birkas HaMazon. Becomes a Din Mesuyah. But I have a Chiddush tonight that I want to share with you. My claim is that although I agree with the first premise in the Ram, that the Rambam, no doubt the Rambam holds that Chiyuv Chinuch is incumbent upon the child, but I disagree with the second premise. What do I mean? Birkas HaMazon is not the rule, but the exception to the rule. In Birkas HaMazon, the Rambam holds that the Katan picks up the Chiyuv of Birkas HaMazon. It becomes a Din Mesuyam. But I don't believe that that's the Rambam Shita in general about the nature of Chinuch. And what I'd like to suggest is that in Chinuch, in general, the Rambam holds we have a Din Klali of Chinuch. It's only in this exceptional case, and maybe one other exceptional case that I want to show you, where the Rambam took Chinuch and generated a Din Mesuyam. Birkas HaMazon and Tefillah, as we'll soon see. Now here again, I only have one copy of this, so if you could take it and share it, and I apologize for that. We saw the Rambam in Perek Hey, Milchas Brachos. It's very important that you see this inside. Maybe you could somehow share it. I apologize. And I want you to look at page 2. I would like to quote to you 8 different Rambams. I really did my homework here. In 8 cases of Chinuch, the Rambam adds 3 words. Okay, let's. We don't have to go through all 8. I mean, you'll get the feeling for it very quickly. Okay, in Hilchas Kriyat Shema, Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph, Nashim ve'avonim uktanim p'turim mikriyat Shema, u'melamdim es haktanim likrosa b'yonasa v'arch l'fnei u'lachra kidei l'chanchan. And what other words does Rambam add here? B'mitzvos. Now, if the Rambam would have said kidei l'chanchan, I understand the Rambam is generating a mitzvah of chinuch, but what's kidei l'chanchan b'mitzvos? Take a look in Hilchas Tefillin, Perek Dalet Aleph Yud Gimel. Katan sheyodea lishmar tefillin, aviv lokech lo tefillin kidei l'chancho, again, b'mitzvos. Notice that the Rambam doesn't feel comfortable just mentioning chinuch in general. In every single mitzvah, he's going to tell you the mitzvah of chinuch. Why? Because he wants to define the shear of chinuch. For example, in Katan, how far does it go? Meladin es haktotel likrosa ba'onasa u'biberchasa. Or in the case of tefillin, at what point is the Katan old enough, mature enough for the mitzvah of tefillin? Only if he's yodea lishmar tefillin. So again, as you'll soon see, in every single mitzvah, the Rambam has to establish those particular dinim and shiurim in chinuch. But consistently, the Rambam adds the words kidei lachancho b'mitzvos. If you look at the third case on your page, Hilchas Tzitzis Perek Gimel. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but kidei lachancho b'mitzvos in Hilchas Shofar, the Rambam says that you bring the katan into the sukkah kidei lachancho b'mitzvos. Then, with regard to lulav, katan ayodel nanechai b'lulav kidei lachancho b'mitzvos. Hilchas Chagiga, with regard to the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel kidei lachancho b'mitzvos. Hilchas chametzu matzah, with regard to the mitzvah of achilus matzah kidei lachanchen also b'mitzvos. And again, in Hilchas Shvisas Asar, with regard to the mitzvah of Tainis, Kedei Lechancho b'mitzvos. So I know of 8 times. There may be a whole bunch more. The one to ask is the Baal Yad HaPshuta, who has his source. He comes from here, from Toronto. I mean, I don't know if he was born in Toronto, but he certainly, Rabbi Nochem Rabbanov certainly spent a lot of time here in Toronto, right? Is anybody here who knew him in that tekufa? No. You'd have to be a really old timer from Toronto of yesteryear. These are the 8 cases that I found. Now, the exception to the rule I found in Birkas HaMazon. Do you see a paragraph that starts Ulam if you drop down 2 paragraphs? So, in regard to Tefillah, the Rambam leaves out Kidei L'chancho b'mitzvos. He says, Noshim avanim v'ketanim chayovim b'tefillah. B'tefillah meaning in the mitzvah of Tefillah. He doesn't say Kidei L'chancho b'mitzvos. In Hilchas Brachas Perkei, this is the Rambam we started with. In regard to Birkas HaMazon, the Rambam says Kidei L'chancho, but he doesn't say Kidei L'chancho b'mitzvos. So the extra word mitzvos is left out. Now, one thing is clear, as I said at the outset, I'm not going to debate with you. I honestly believe that according to the Rambam, a katan is chayiv in chinuch. And you'll see it over and over again. Kol katan sheyodel is atev chayiv b'tzitzis. The katan is chayiv b'tzitzis. Katan hayodel inanea chayiv b'lulav. Katan sheyachol lechol pas mechanchen so b'mitzvahs. I don't know, that's maybe not as crystal clear, but I believe you can postulate that according to the Rambam, the katan picks up the chiyuv chinuch. But now we have to ask the question, does it take on the complexion of that particular mitzvah? Is he chayiv in matzah b'toras matzah, lulav b'toras lulav, sukkah b'toras lulav, b'toras sukkah, and kriyat shema b'toras kriyat shema? Well, what's your impression? I think it's a din kloli. I'll tell you why. Because otherwise, why did the Rambam use that word b'mitzvos? He keeps sending us back to this general universal halacha of chinuch b'mitzvos. B'mitzvos, in the plural. He didn't have to add that. But there are 2 exceptions. Tefillah and Birkas HaMazon. Those are the 2 cases in which the Rambam omits Kidei L'chancho b'mitzvos. And I would submit to you that according to the Rambam, in those 2 cases, and only in those 2 cases, does the Rambam generate a din misuyah in which the chiyuv chinuch incumbent upon the katan generates that particular mitzvah. And therefore, as we saw in the Rambam Birkas HaMazon, the katan can be motzi a gadol in Birkas HaMazon under those circumstances, because the katan now picks up that mitzvah, and he's a bar chiyuv, and that mitzvah can be motzi a gadol. Now you'll ask me the question, what's unique about Tefillah and Birkas HaMazon? So that belongs to a different tool of Brisk, which I call a cheftz of Tefillah, or a cheftz of Birkas HaMazon. The Rambam holds that the chiyuv in that particular mitzvah is generated by the fact that the katan could create a cheftz shel Birkas HaMazon. He has a cheftz shel Tefillah. And this ties into a longer discussion, which you'll see on page 1, about a katan with regard to Talmud Torah. Because I'll tell you the nafkamina. If a katan's chiyuv of Talmud Torah, b'toras chinuch, is a mitzvah klalis, it's a general mitzvah, then I don't think that the katan is obligated to teach Torah. He has to study Torah. But what happens if you have the Vilna Gaon, and at the age of 8, he knows more Torah than all of us combined? Would we impose upon this katan a chiyuv to teach Torah? Because the Gemara says in Kedusha Chavtes that anyone who has a chiyuv to study Torah has a chiyuv to teach Torah. So if the katan picks up the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and what's incumbent upon the katan is to study Torah as a mitzvah per se of Talmud Torah, what we call a din misuyam, then I think we can talk about his chiyuv to teach Torah. Because it's a package deal. Whoever has the chiyuv to study Torah has the chiyuv to teach Torah. If, on the other hand, it's a din klali, then who says that when the Rabbanan established the mitzvah of chinuch with regard to Talmud Torah, they obligated the katan to teach Torah? Maybe all his chiyuv is only to study Torah. He doesn't have to teach Torah. And the Rambam, which I want to show you, it's on the bottom of your page 1 here, The Rambam says in Perek Hey Milchus Talmud Torah, well, take a look at the bottom of page 2, it's a little clearer. Perek Vav Halacha Aleph. Do you see the last paragraph? Kol Talmid Chachamim Mitzvah Lahadra. Right? And the Rambam is talking about the special mitzvah be Mahadra your Rebbe. Okay, I mean, you have to go through Perek Hey, Perek Vav, we don't have time now. But what is Kol Talmid Chacham? What's the Kol? So I saw that some of the Mepharshei Rambam says, even if he's a Katan. Now, why would you have a mitzvah to be Mahadir, this Katan, unless he teaches Torah? So this might be implicit. What's implicit in this Ram, perhaps, is that the Katan not only has to study Torah, the Torah's chinuch, he also has to teach Torah, and therefore we have to be mechabed him under the mitzvah of Adarta Pnei Zaken. So again, just to summarize with regard to the mitzvah of chinuch, is it a mitzvah klalis or a mitzvah misuyemes? I would say the following. As far as the father is concerned, it's a chiyuv klali. As far as the son is concerned, I'm not sure if he's chayiv at all. I feel him to Tzalom, even though I agree with you, he's chayiv. I don't know if he's chayiv in that mitzvah, maybe he's chayiv in chinuch in general. But in the Rambam, I think it splits. The Rambam would hold that in general, the chiyuv of the katan, even if I grant you that he's obligated in chinuch, but it's a mitzvah klolis, and the exception to the rule is whenever he can create that chefetz. If he has a chefetz shel Torah, then we can be mechayev him in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. If he has a chefetz shel tefillah, chefetz shel birkas hamazon, we can be mechayev him with that specific name, that category of tefillah and birkas hamazon. The nafkamina is that he might, in the case of Talmud Torah, have a chiyuv to teach, because kol hachayev lilmod chayev l'lamed, and in the case of birkas hamazon, he can be motzi a gun. Okay, we'll stop here.